The war in the Middle East continues to drag on interminably. Netanyahu continues to go after political outcomes via military means that are incompatible and cannot be accomplished. And then there's this issue about the hostages, especially the American ones. Where is the interest in the United States? Where is the outrage that there's nothing's being done to protect our hostages? Why are we not even talking about that? We're going to get into some of that. But first of all, we're going to bring in one of the show favorites here is Matthew Ho, long friend of mine, great guy, former State Department official, former decorated Marine combat leader, and just a great guy. So good on some of these issues here. Loves people. And that's one of the reasons we like to have you on here, Matt. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Danny. I appreciate it.
Always good to have you on here. But before we actually get into those main issues we're going to discuss on this show here, want to bring in a bit of breaking news that happened literally just before we came on the air here. Chairman Mike Turner, Rep. Mike Turner of the Intelligence Committee, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, to be specific, just released this on Twitter just not about an hour or so ago. He says, today, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence has made available to all members of Congress information concerning a serious national security threat. I am requesting that the President Biden declassify all material related to this threat so that Congress, the administration, and our allies can openly discuss the actions necessary to respond to this threat. That sounds very ominous. And I've been seeing lots of people speculate back and forth over what it might mean. But apparently, according to some knowledgeable sources that have access to the White House, it has something to do with an emerging Russian threat, which has my alarm bells going off, my BS alarm bells going off. I'll just say, first of all, here. But just moments ago, Jake Sullivan was asked about this. And here's what he had to say.
Serious national security threat. What can you say about the threat and what the administration plans to do?
So first, I reached out earlier this week to the Gang of Eight to offer myself up for a personal briefing to the Gang of Eight. And in fact, we scheduled a briefing for the 4 House members of the Gang of Eight tomorrow. That's been on the books. So I am a bit surprised that Congressman Turner came out publicly today in advance of a meeting on the books for me to go sit with him alongside our intelligence and defense professionals tomorrow. That's his choice to do that. All I can tell you is that I'm focused on going to see him, sit with him, as well as the other House members of the Gang of Eight tomorrow. And I'm not in a position to say anything further from this podium at this time, other than to make the broad point that this administration has gone further and in more creative, more strategic ways dealt with the declassification of intelligence in the national interest of the United States than any administration in history. So you definitely are not going to find an unwillingness to do that when it's in our national security interest to do so. At the same time, we, of course, have to continue to prioritize and focus very much on the issue of sources and methods. We'll do that. Ultimately, these are decisions for the president to make. But in the meantime, the most important thing is we have the opportunity to sit in a classified setting and have the kind of conversation with the House intelligence leadership that I, in fact, had scheduled before Congressman Turner went out today. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like Jake's trying to say, this is no big deal, man. Was something that was actually scheduled. So I don't know what Turner's doing. I don't know much about Rep. Turner, so I don't know kind of where he's at. But I got to say that in light of these, this push to get a lot of money for Ukraine, it seems to me that somebody's trying to say, oh my God, we have to do something quick. So I'll be interested in seeing what Turner has to say later, or Jake. But that's a ringing in my ears that this sounds like trying to hype up something to get more cash.
Right. It's obviously you hear this from Mike Turner and you think, is this going to be about TikTok? Is this going to be about the border? How are they going to politicize this? And then certainly, as you said, Danny, with the amount of money involved here, particularly with the fight that's going to come up in the House over the foreign military assistance supplemental that the Senate just passed, they are going to pull out all the tried and true methods of warmongering and fear-mongering. I would guess if you want to if we speculate here, Russia supposedly utilized one of their new hypersonic missiles this past week, the KH-47. It could be that they fired it off of one of their ships. right? And so this could be, look, this threat that we have here, we can't shoot these missiles down, right? They could put these off the coast of the United States. A hypersonic could hit Washington, D.C. in 6 minutes from wherever, So I think it's going to be something along those.
And I got some bad news for those folks. Russia already has missiles that we can't shoot down that could hit the United States, ICBMs, as we
Right.
have on the other side. So not really sure why that's any breaking news, but sure, why not?
Right, exactly. But it's the hype. It's the fear mongering. It's the banging of the drum, particularly as we got to get our people in line to vote for this bill in the House. And we have to make them feel afraid that they won't be tough enough on the Russians, that they'll be weak. They're giving in to our enemy if they don't vote for this bill. And this type of language has been used forever, basically.
Yeah,
Right.
but before we get on to our primary topic here, let's just stay on this just for a second, because there's a lot of really confusion and curiosity about the Republican side. Okay, everybody knows that Democrats and Republicans are always at loggerheads, but within the Republican Party, there seems to be almost a split personality. Over in the Senate, you had this huge bipartisan majority pass that bill. And then on the House side, you've got almost complete unanimity against any decision or any bill at all that doesn't have border security in it. And I'm wondering if you can address a little bit, if you've heard anything even. Is this just kind of gamesmanship among the Republicans so that they're going to vote for something in the Senate to try to look like they care about Ukraine when they know for sure it won't be passed in the House? Or is there really this huge split within the Republican Party, whether it's between the Senate and the House or otherwise?
I think there is this split within the Republican Party. A lot of it's driven by Donald Trump. Trump is, many reasons for why this back and forth in terms of we want a border, we want a peace, we want the border legislation. We don't want the border legislation, back and forth. A lot of that could be tied to Trump's comments and Trump's direction as to what the Republicans should be doing in this. Trump holds a lot of sway. One, the amount of money he can fundraise, but two, his just clout, his voice, the megaphone he has can, in many estimations, a champion or doom a candidate, including incumbents. And so they are very afraid of him, and many of them are in awe of him. But you also have within the House membership, you have these Freedom Caucus members, these far right conservative members who are, I don't agree with them on many things, if any at all, but who are guided by principle and who have said we will not pay for anything that does not have an offset. So we're not going to increase spending without decreasing a corresponding amount. And so you see that these are people who have signed their name to that oath, and they intend to keep it. But it's the same type of political gamesmanship is occurring with the Democrats as well.
Well, yeah. And in fact, I wanted to ask you specifically about that, because the Democrats went like really over the top. Schumer in particular, when after the Senate voted on that bill, to say they have this great bill that's going to provide democracy, you're going to secure democracy as we know it into the future, even though the bill has, first of all, the bill has virtually no chance to being passed in the current environment because if the House won't do the other half of it. But then the second part is that you're talking about national security for the United States, especially because he said it would otherwise be a betrayal of the American service members. But then you don't even have anything about American protection on the border. That's not even in the bill. And you do have great deal of money for all these other countries, especially Ukraine. That's the war is effectively lost already, and there's no path to victory here, but they seem oblivious to that. So what is the point, or what is the drive for the Democratic Party to push this narrative?
It's a narrative they chose, and they're going to stick to it. So if you recall, the first Biden re-election campaign ad going back to September was of President Biden visiting Kyiv, this 1 minute long spot.
Oh, that's right.
Wartime presidency, right?
Alarms allegedly went off in the air raid sirens. Yeah,
that's right. So you see, that was the Democratic Party's calculation that Ukraine is a major issue for our base of voters. We believe that our people will come out and vote. We don't know. We're not going to get Republicans from it. We're probably not going to get many independents from Ukraine, but this is something that will get our people to come out and vote. The people who have been flying the blue and yellow flag for the last year and a half, they are going to come out and support us on this issue. What the Republicans have realized smartly is that people aren't going to vote on Ukraine. People aren't interested in Ukraine. They don't see it
Do you think
as
the
a
Democratic
real
base is, though?
the Democrat
will
to a
that really motivate them?
I think to a degree, but not to the degree that and again, the Republicans aren't going to get votes from that anyway. So what the Republicans have done is they've said, look, Ukraine is not a national security issue. The border is. And so that's what, getting back to the Republicans, what's animating them, what I left out was the importance of this border issue, how they see that border issue as being one of the hottest, most important, pressing things they can talk about on the campaign.
Allegedly, 86% of the voters say it is a top issue.
That's exactly right. And you just saw this special election in New York where the Democrat won that special election for George Santos's seat, a guy representing Queens and Long Island. And he was hard on immigration. He was, not what you would expect from a Democrat on immigration. So the Republicans have understood this. And so not only is they're going to get the support from their base on this, but they also see how the border is the thing that's going to get them votes from independents and maybe even some votes from Democrats, while Ukraine is not going to do that for the Democrats at all. So major miscalculation on the Democratic Party, on the White House's part here. You also see, though, too, the Democratic Party, how slavish and devoted they are to this. Wherein, of course, you had back in October, Speaker Kevin McCarthy was removed by the Republicans. The Democrats could have saved him, intervened in that speaker vote, but they chose not to, which I think I've always thought that was a big strategic mistake. Now, what's happening is you have members of the Democratic House Caucus saying to the media that we will save Speaker Johnson. If Speaker Johnson brings forward this Ukraine spending bill, which is what they call it, they leave out Israel, they leave out Taiwan, they leave out the Red Sea, right? But they want to talk about Ukraine. That's what they want to talk about. If Speaker Johnson brings forward this Ukraine bill, which the conservatives, the Freedom Caucus that brought down Speaker McCarthy says they will do the same to Johnson on, you have Democrats now saying we will keep Johnson in power, including Adam Smith, the ranking, the chair, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. So, you're seeing this type of political gamesmanship over this Ukraine bill, which the Republicans have smartly tied to the border. They've got this, again, I don't agree with them, but it's a really good tagline of like, the Democrats are concerned about other people's borders. We're concerned about ours.
Yeah.
It plays really well. It sounds really well. It touches people. Right. So, you're seeing this basically this great miscalculation on the part of the Democrats. But we have to remember the Ukraine war. So much of it is tied to the whole anti-Trump Russiagate narrative that the Democratic Party has been pushing for 8 years now, more than 8 years, 9 years, basically. So the Ukraine war has a lot to do with that. And so the fact that the Democrats are now dealing with the consequences of politicizing that war, trying to make it into a partisan contest, and now having failed in their management of that, again, political gamesmanship, they're in a really difficult place here, but not nearly as difficult, of course, as the Ukrainians.
Right. Yeah, that's a separate issue there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to shift gears now and go back to the primary task that we publicized this for here, and shift over to another big issue that has a lot of ramifications, both for the United States and for other innocent people, this time in Palestinian areas of Gaza Strip in particular. And we want to take a look at some contradictions and some things that aren't able to square, which, of course, there's a lot of things I could choose from here related to that war, but we're going to zero in on what I think are the most important ones for our audience here. First of all, let's look at what Benjamin Netanyahu says, that he is going for total victory.
We are on our way to that decisive victory. It is in our hands. It's not a matter of perhaps weeks, but it is in a matter of months. The IDF are working systematically, and they will achieve all the objectives of the war. They're going to release all the hostages, eliminate Hamas, and Gaza will no longer be a threat to Israel. I have decided that that is our objective. That is the decision I made at the beginning of this war, and we will not suffice with less.
Now, subsequent to that, he added a little bit more detail on what he means by winning specifically in the Gaza Strip.
I've instructed the army accordingly to give us a plan, a dual plan. One, to vacate the population, the civilian population, because we're not fighting them, we're fighting the terrorists. And secondly, to destroy those remaining battalions. Victory is within reach, and we should all strive for that common target to destroy Hamas, because that gets all the other objectives within our purview. It also gets something else. It gives us hope for the Middle East, hope for peace. You can't have that with Hamas remaining intact.
I love that last phrase there, because that's what I am so advocated for, which is peace. Now, Netanyahu, as I have said throughout this entire conflict, he is seeking a political outcome, peace for the people of Israel, that cannot be accomplished with the military means that he is employing. In fact, he's going to have exactly the opposite result, which we're going to talk about in some detail here in a second. But first of all, I want to show you somebody else, and I believe it was just yesterday, King Abdullah of Jordan had a very different view on how to achieve peace.
7 decades of occupation, death, and destruction have proven beyond any doubt that there can be no peace without a political horizon. Military and security solutions are not the answer. They can never bring peace. Civilians on both sides continue to pay for this protracted conflict with their lives. All attacks against innocent civilians, women and children, including those of October 7th, cannot be accepted by any Muslim, as I had previously stressed. We must make sure the horrors of the past few months, since October 7th, are never repeated nor accepted by any human being.
Now, if you could just kind of lay out what you think is the difference in focus between what Netanyahu thinks he's going to accomplish and what King Abdullah is talking about the people of Palestine, and that there has to be a political horizon for them to have hope with, which is completely absent from the Netanyahu vision. So he said in a separate interview here that he estimates, I mean, it may have been yesterday, that there have been, I think it was 18 of the 24 Hamas battalions have been destroyed. So he wants to press. That's why he wants to go into Rafah, which would just be a catastrophe. But he claims that once he gets those last battalions, that somehow there's going to be peace. What do you think is more likely to happen?
Well, it's not going to be peace. It reminds me of what Tacitus said about the Romans. They make a desolation, or they make an abomination, or they make a desert, and they call it peace. So this idea that they will continue to raise Gaza, they will continue its destruction, they will continue this genocide, and then at some point they will declare peace. And of course, it will be a false peace. It will be a peace that only engenders further war. King Abdullah is absolutely correct. The only way to achieve peace in this is through political negotiations. The idea that you were going to go into Gaza, completely destroy it, kill, wound, or make missing one out of every 20 Gazans, and that would somehow break the spirit of resistance. Is just it's confounding. What type of logic in that? What type of reasoning is behind that understanding? So what we'll see here is, and I doubt those numbers about destroying 18 out of 24 Hamas battalions are correct. I don't believe that to be the case. Surely they've been degraded, but certainly they've not destroyed their military capability, and they have barely dented at all their military leadership, and they've made even less of a dent. If anything, they've significantly enhanced the political leadership of Hamas. So this idea that somehow you're going to go in there and do this genocide, do this destruction, create this suffering, and that somehow the Gazans are going to give up their resistance because of that, it's only going to increase.
Matt, I want to ask you something, because when you say these words like this, they come with a little more gravitas than a lot of people, because you, as a combat Marine, were actually in the middle of some of this. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your personal experience when you saw, when we were going after, targeted, what we called terrorists at that time, or the insurgency in Iraq, and how much did we worry about taking care of the civilian population, and what was the result when we went after those people? In other words, did we do some version of what Israel's trying to do?
No, not even close to what occurred in Iraq or Afghanistan. What was occurring in the West Bank at times, that's very akin to what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's the occupation itself. But this is genocide. This is ethnic cleansing. This is destruction. We didn't do anything even remotely similar. And oftentimes we went to great lengths to prevent civilian casualties. Now that's almost an impossibility, because it's warfare, because you're an occupying power, because you become an agent of war and its immorality. I mean, so all those things are going to make it so that the civilian populations of Iraq and Afghanistan suffered horribly under our occupation, as well as those we have put in power. Remember, both the Iraqi and the Afghan governments that we put and kept in power were seen as very, very predatory by the civilian population. And so that just engendered support for the insurgencies. But what you're seeing here in Gaza is that times 10 or times 100. So that the resistance provided by Hamas is just completely emboldened and strengthened by the Israelis' actions. And one of the things
I found it very odd that, because I'm glad you went down this road here, because it was a very strange thing Kirby said.
Right.
It might have been today. You've seen this already. We have that clip. Gary, roll that clip.
Around 28,000 people have been killed. What does the White House base the assessment that Israel is receptive to its concerns?
As I said, we have seen them take actions, sometimes actions that even I'm not sure our own military would take, in terms of informing civilian populations ahead of operations, where to go, where not to go. They have taken steps. Now, obviously, those steps, while noteworthy, haven't been enough to reduce the civilian casualties, which is why the president spoke so forthrightly about it yesterday, and why we're going to continue to do everything we can to press the Israelis to be more careful.
But respectfully, he's been talking forcefully about it for a long time. Shouldn't there be more forceful action than just words?
We are working very, very closely with our Israeli counterparts. We've made clear our concerns that we would not support a Rafah operation that did not properly account for the more than 1 million refugees that are down in Rafah. We've been very, very clear and consistent about that.
Okay. Now, Matt, first of all, I know from my own experience in combat that we go put a lot of emphasis and effort on protecting the civilian population, not merely saying we're going to provide corridors, but actually protecting them. So I know that my experience has been with that, and I'm pretty sure yours has as well. But I noticed that Kirby was hedging there toward the end when he said, yeah, we're not going to support an operation into Rafah unless they have some provisions, which means Netanyahu can just say some words that he is, even though there's no actions to support it. And I think that maybe they will. How did you read that statement?
Oh, it's well, first of all, Kirby's overall comments are outrageous. As someone who, like you, who directly participated in the wars, and hey, look, I have a lot of criticism for how we behaved over there, what we did, how we performed. I have a lot of criticism for that. But to say that somehow the Israelis are doing a better job at protecting civilians than the Americans did, or Americans would, is just simply outrageous. I mean, you have a question here. This is a man who was an admiral in the United States Navy. First of all, where does his loyalties lie? To say just an outrageous, bold-faced fabrication, something so removed from reality. It also shows you what his experience was. Here's a man who was an officer in the United States Navy throughout those wars, and he obviously never set foot on ground, walked to patrol, spent any time among men and women who served there, let alone any of the families who bore the grief and the suffering of not having people come back, or having people come back physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually handicapped. So, I mean, it's just outrageous that he said this. But, with regards to the aspect of Rafah, you know, I get this feeling, Danny, that it's almost as if the White House is saying, come on, get this Rafah thing done, get this over with, finish this thing up so we can move on. The longer you keep this going, the more it becomes a liability for us. The longer this goes on, the less chance people are going to forget about this by November. But I get this feeling that this is what the White House is just trying to get this thing over the goal line, so to speak, right? Try and get this thing finished. Rafah is the last city to be destroyed. Just hurry up and do it. We're running out of time here for us to continue to spin, to deflect, to defend you. Right. And I think that's what they're hoping for. They're hoping that by this time next week, the Israeli army has declared Rafah defeated. The Hamas is vanquished. They've proceeded to move into phase 4 of their operation. And now Kirby can say, well, Israel's not doing combat operations in Gaza any longer, even as they're killing 100, 150, 200 people a day, starving many of them to death, many of them succumbing to disease. Kirby, Matt Miller at the State Department, Jake Sullivan, others will say, well, combat's not going on there any longer. This is, stability operations that are occurring right now. And this really is about the Gazan people taking ownership, taking responsibility for their own circumstances, right? All the same nonsense we heard before, how Iraq wasn't a sovereign country as we had 150, how Iraq was a sovereign country as we had 150,000 troops there in it, right? I mean, like just that BS, yeah, right? I mean, so I think that's what the White House is looking forward to, is to get to that point where they can start making these new arguments about how to.
Well, sort of fair enough. If that's their objective, okay, as far as it goes, that may be what they want. But do they think? And when I say they, I mean I'm talking about the senior leaders in the White House. Do they think that if Netanyahu gets it done, gets it over with, and goes through Rafah, that somehow that's going to result in some sort of stabilization of the situation? Or do they not recognize that the people in Palestine and in the Gaza Strip are not going to be satisfied when they have nowhere to live, because everything has been just almost wiped out? I think so upwards of 70%, possibly more, of the domicile positions and apartments and whatever have been destroyed. So where are they going to go? And what little is left is probably in the Rafah area. And if that gets turned into the same thing like Gaza City did in the beginning, I mean, there's not going to be anywhere for anyone to live. What does Biden think that the rest of the war is going to be like? Or does he think that's going to pacify them? I mean, how do you read what the White House may be thinking?
I don't think they're interested in the mid or long-term strategic implications of this. I really don't think they are. I mean, I'm sure there are some staffers there that are having these conversations, along the lines of, what do we expect? Just as you said, what do you think is going to happen here? What can we expect is going to happen? But I think for the leadership of the White House, the State Department, the National Security Council, et cetera, they are politically minded, and our thoughts are in the moment. What is best for us short term? What can we say for this evening's newscast? What can we say for Sunday morning's talk shows? That is what they are. That's what they care about. The narrative to them is everything. The strategic reality of it, the implications, the consequences are things we will worry about later. But right now, we are going to address what's happening in the moment. We're either going to defend ourselves or champion ourselves. And then the strategy is one of hope that, in a month from now, something else is going on. That in 2 months from now, Trump has said something that makes everybody pay attention to him. And that these, whatever the consequences in Gaza are not going to be paid attention to, because, one, you don't have bombs going off, right? So it's not as theatrical, but also, two, it's passé now. And, the media is going to move on, shift on,
move on with it, kind of thing.
Right. And again, and it becomes a question of, like, the Israelis have stopped their combat. It's up to the Palestinians to take control of their, of their situation, of their circumstances. So I think that is how they look to handle this.
Well, they may be wanting to go down that direction. I'm not sure it's going to work out the way they want.
Exactly.
Because you have yesterday, you had Erdogan and Sisi had a joint statement. So they're talking about this a lot. You saw Jordan King Abdullah is in the White House just because it's extremely important to them what's going on. All of these, Iran-backed groups throughout the Middle East, Houthis down in the Yemen, obviously continuing to cause a lot of challenges and difficulty for us. So they're not going to stop. This stuff isn't going to go away anytime soon. But it's also, so the White House doesn't seem to care anything about the Palestinian people who are the bill payers for all of this mess, or the most of it. But it also doesn't seem that they're too concerned about Americans. There's an interesting dynamic here that hasn't gotten much press at all in the West, and that is with the hostage situation. Now, most people focus on the Israeli hostages here, and in one of those clips I played earlier from Netanyahu's, he just sort of briefly mentioned that, yeah, we're going to take care of hostages and get them all. That's part of our objectives, which I don't think he doesn't appear to actually care about his own hostages. But here's what the White House and President Biden had to say about hostages.
Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I'm pushing very hard now to deal with this hostage ceasefire because, I've been working tirelessly in this deal. How can I say this without revealing it? To lead to a sustained pause in the fighting.
Okay, there are a lot of American hostages in the middle of, or in the group of the whatever it is that's left, 150 some odd or so. Apparently up to 50 of these hostages have reportedly been killed by Israeli offensive operations. We'll talk about that separately. But why is the president of the United States talking about basically begging Netanyahu to go on this pause that Hamas apparently is willing to sign up for? Qatar is trying to negotiate a cessation of hostilities for a period of time to where they can actually get hostages released. I think they're looking for like 6 weeks or something like that, which I am absolutely all for. Anything to get those hostages back, and especially to give some breathing space to all the rest of the people trapped inside the Gaza Strip would seem to be an easy win. But you see Biden admitting there, he's basically begging the Netanyahu to agree to it, and he's not, and we're not using any of the leverage we have. Why does Biden not seem to care about even our own hostages?
Yeah, it is. This is really disturbing. And of course, what the hostages and their families have gone through is heartbreaking. It's the same, of course, for all the thousands of Palestinian hostages, thousands of Palestinian prisoners who have been held by Israelis for many years now. I think what I keep coming back to on this, though, Danny, is that the White House is deathly scared of the Israeli lobby. That's what's keeping the United States from exerting any type of leverage on this. I mean, Joe Biden is a self-proclaimed Zionist. The national security, foreign policy establishment in Washington, D.C. is very much pro-Israel. We have seen this in both Democratic and Republican administrations. We've had wars that you can make very real, solid, authoritative arguments that were about Israel, right? Their war in Iraq, the war in Syria. I mean, you can make these very strong arguments that Israel was, if not the prime, a very important motivating factor in America's choice to utilize warfare in the Middle East to try and strengthen Israel's position. So certainly there is a pro-Israel spirit, bias, whatever you want to call it, within Washington, D.C. But to me, the overriding thing is the Israel lobby and its power in American elections. And the White House, the Democratic Party, is deathly afraid that the Israel lobby will pull its support from the Democrats in this election, throw it behind Donald Trump, throw it behind Bobby Kennedy, throw it behind a no labels candidate, whoever, or all three of them. And that will be what ultimately decides the race, is the amount of Israeli lobby money, as well as the amount of Israeli lobby money that has already been pledged to go into U.S. House races. You know, so effectively, the Democratic Party would not be able to retake the House, as well as maybe it would throw a couple Senate elections. And we have, I mean, and this is not speculation. This is what the Israeli lobby itself says. The Israeli lobby brags about its influence, about its power. They brag about how in North Carolina here, last election cycle, they were the reason why two progressive Democrats did not win election in North Carolina, that they were beat by conservative Democrats in their primaries. I mean, so they are open about this. They are overt about it. This is not some type of conspiracy theory thing. This is how American politics work. And so that's what I keep coming back to, because there has been no leverage put on Israel. As we know, more than 25,000 tons of munitions have been provided to Israel. And I don't believe that number includes the amount of munitions that have been taken out of the American stockpiles that were already in Israel. I mean, so you're talking about thousands and thousands of tons, multiple times over the explosive weight of the Hiroshima bomb have been provided to Israel since October 7th. So there has been absolutely zero leverage put on the Israeli government. The best you get is these really weak and
little statements.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the excuses for that, the apologies for that words matter. You hear this from the American spokespeople, and it's just absolutely revolting, sickening. It's embarrassing. But certainly, this is what we're looking at, is the fact that Netanyahu is strengthened. He's in a very good position where he has this leverage over the Democratic Party in a way that makes the American leverage, the real leverage of all this American assistance provided to Israel, not just military, but intelligence, political, diplomatic, media, makes that worthless, makes it completely worthless. And so he's able to push forward with something that everyone knows is destructive, as we've said. Everyone knows that is going to promote instability, weakens Israel's longtime security. And this isn't just people like you and I saying this, Danny. I'd recommend people go and look at the report that Moody's credit agency just released this few days ago, explaining why they downgraded Israel. And is an excellent write-up as to the risk, the future risk in both economic and political terms to Israel based upon these types of decisions by Netanyahu to pursue victory. And that's the term. Netanyahu uses that word in every paragraph, every third or fourth sentence says victory. And what he means, of course, is his own political survival. That's what he's talking about, his own political survival, first and foremost, as well as accomplishing the next phase of the expansion of Greater Israel. And that's what we have to understand, is that's what he's talking about when
he outright said, from the river to the sea, we're going to take it all.
And if that means then Israel has to be Fortress Israel, where the entire nation lives under arms, which it basically does now, but it lives in a militarized state that is constantly under attack, constantly has to deal with the revolution of 5 million Palestinians it is keeping down through occupation, which again it has been doing for decades, but this on a much more supercharged level. Then so be it, because that is the cost of victory. And so we have to understand that these people don't want peace, they want victory.
And they're going to have neither, is the bottom line, the way they're going on here. In the last few minutes we have here, Matt, I wonder if you could address something that is just maddening to me beyond any comparison. It really robs me of sleep quite often. And that is all these images that we keep showing here about the suffering of the Palestinian people and the wanton cavalier destruction of the infrastructure needed to sustain life throughout the entire Gaza Strip here, and especially these horrific images of children suffering. We had these reports on recently that up to 1,000, actually over 1,000 Palestinian children have had to undergo amputations, most of which without any anesthesia, because the Israelis won't allow that in there. And when you see that, if this was any nation on the face of the earth, the American people as a whole would be up in arms about this and would be demanding that the government do something to stop them. and to, to use whatever aid we have, whatever diplomatic pressures that we could apply, economic, et cetera. And yet it's just crickets across the board, or not across the board. There are some, but in terms of what's people that are in power, it's like the government and most of our major media just want to turn a blind eye to it. How could we not care when our American values have always prioritized the defending the weak and the women and the children and the old people and I mean anybody really for that matter who's being killed in pursuit of Israel operations here, killing people that have nothing to do with the war and are as big of victims as the Israeli people who were killed on October the 7th. Why do we not care about that? Why is this not motivating more people to demand that Biden put curbs on Netanyahu?
I think a lot of it has to do with our leaders are psychopathic, that they are able, as Senator Chris Van Hollen did the other night, to go on the Senate floor, denounce Israel for the war crime of starving children, cite it correctly as a war crime, condemn them correctly as war criminals, and then go forward and vote for sending Israel $14 billion more, plus two included in that foreign military assistance supplemental bill was the prohibition of funding to UNRWA. So not only is he sending them the money to continue to kill, he has also blocked money to help feed those children that he was making these protestations about, that he was ripping his shirt open for. You know, I mean, so we have psychopaths in power. We have a media that is, we have an elite media. Certainly, I think we all should be, regardless of what you think of Tucker Carlson and his interview with Vladimir Putin, all that, I think we all should note that how hysterical the corporate media, the legacy media has been over that interview, because they're witnessing someone get 200 million views interviewing the president of Russia. I mean, so they are scared to death that their business is dying and that they will no longer be, among other things, profitable, and their stockholders will be upset and they'll be out of jobs, but they also will no longer be among the elites of the United States, right? They will no longer be among the elites of the empire. They will no longer be part of the empire's establishment, right? They'll lose that position. But, also too, you see what I come to, Danny, and I think this will affect you. This affects you as well, is the silence of our churches and the fact that there has been so little. And what I hear from people is like, well, what they said in church was about separation of church and state. And I want to take a moment just to read the last two lines of Walt Whitman's poem, A Sight in Camp and the Daybreak. People know Walt Whitman, American poet and writer of the mid-19th century, observed and wrote quite a bit about the American Civil War. And, in this poem, the last two lines are, and I find myself coming back to these lines as I see these photos and these videos coming from Gaza, of these young men, of these young women who are being killed by a foreign military for the crime of resistance, for the crime of standing up for who they are, for the crime of standing up for their people. And, so Whitman writes, "Young man, I think I know you. I think this face is the face of the Christ himself, dead and divine and brother of all. And here again he lies." And I think about that as I watch these videos and I see these photos of these of whether they're young or old. But that idea that Whitman is talking about is we've seen this before. And so those of us who identify as Christians, those of us who identify in some manner of universality with all people, of a common connection to all our brothers and sisters, to witness this, but then to hear either to hear the silence, if you will, as you were describing, Danny, and as well, to hear this dissonance, these protests from Jake Sullivan and Admiral Kirby and Tony Blinken, that this is not genocide, this is self-defense. So between the two camps of silence and dissonance, I think a lot of us are having a spiritual crisis watching this. And of course, we're watching it. It's not being inflicted upon us. So certainly a great difference there. But that's what I think about when I watch these videos and I see these photos.
Yeah, that matches my view at all, my frustration. among the churches. I don't want churches to get involved with politics. I don't even want them to, but I do want them to say, hey, we care about people, and at least advocate for peace and finding a way out, and recognizing that anyone who was not carrying a gun is a victim, and to defend them, especially when there's so many children and infants and women who are completely innocent in this, and there just doesn't seem to be much, Jesus compassion. I just would like to see more of that. But we'll leave it there for right now. And Matt, thank you so much for coming on and talk about all these issues. As always, you've been able to illuminate quite a few things here that we might not get. And like some of these mainstream media that you're talking about, you're not just giving the main story here. You're giving what people actually think and what things look like on the ground, what you've personally experienced, as well as are seeing here from the vantage point of the Hamas war in Israel. So thank you for coming on. We look forward to seeing you back on the next show.
Thanks, Danny.
And we thank you for joining us today. As I said earlier today, come back and join us at 3 p.m. today, because I am going to cut loose on some of the major media, especially the Washington Post and the New York Times, who are saying some nonsense, some things that you need to know about what people are saying. You need to be armed with the facts and the truth here, because there are some leading publications trying to lead you into the direction of staying in deployments forever, never leaving any place, and taking actions that actually decrease our national security, not improve it. And I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about there. Join us at 3 p.m. today. Remember to like and subscribe, and to share this with your friends so that they have access to the same great material that you do. We will see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.